Hello, everybody, and welcome very much. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm Rebecca Hastings, founder of Lucent Search, and I work with CEOs, boards, and investors to help them hire senior AI and data leaders across the UK and the US. And over the last year, I've been holding some research into what's really going on in the minds of global AI leaders and businesses who are making great inroads with AI versus those who aren't. So I'm joined by Matt Little, who brings deep board expertise to this conversation. He has actually worked in AI and is a chair and experienced board member of several businesses in the tech sector. So he's got a great perspective. So we're going to be talking about what boards should be concerned about, what makes a board AI ready, and where AI execution is failing and what we can do to fix this. So what can you do now on your board? So feel free to add any comments or questions as you go. We'll leave time for Q&A at the end, and we'd love to hear your perspective. But let's just dive straight in. So tell us, Matt, AI has made its way onto every board agenda at this point in time, but a lot of people are still treating it a bit like a tech side project. Why do you think there is this gap between ambition and implementation? What do you think is going on there?
Hi, Rebecca. Good afternoon. It's a really good question. And I see it with a lot of boards I work with, and it's that real difference between having it on the agenda, but it not really delivering the value that boards would hope for. And I think boards are really good at what they do. They're good at governance. They're good at oversight. They are used to providing oversight to a business, and they're treating AI like a compliance item, not as a growth lever. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. Boards often lack the digital fluency to question AI or guide strategy. And I feel that many non-execs and many board members are almost waiting for permission. They're waiting for a guide from the exec team as to how they should be doing AI rather than setting the stage for the exec team. And I think the chair in particular needs to lead engagement, not just the procedure of it all. So they need to she or he needs to set the tone for robust, informed debate, or as I like to call it, fearless, informed conversations.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I know, Rebecca, we were speaking earlier, and you've obviously just released the AI Leadership Blueprint 2025 document, which is very insightful. But can you maybe tell me from your side then, what are the headlines and things that boards and CEOs can't afford to ignore right now?
Absolutely. So I covered a lot of ground in the research that I did, but some of the key points that stand out that I think should be on everybody's radar, be them on the board, CEO, or even an investor, definitely. 63% of the AI leaders that I surveyed and spoke with plan to change roles in the next year, which is significantly higher than other opportunities in the C-suite. So I have had follow-up conversations to delve into this and validate why it's not just that I work in search, that they've, had some bias towards saying that, but there's a couple of common themes and a lot of frustration there. 91% of the respondents said that hiring top AI talent is very or moderately challenging. They're struggling to get the budget or the buy-in or attract the right people. 85% are finding it really hard to come up with any measurable ROI from their AI projects. And 51% of the leaders have said cross functional collaboration and a lack of buy in across their leadership team is a persistent ongoing blocker. There were specific frustrations in different businesses around the relationship with the finance function and the marketing function. And above all, I think one of the themes was they felt that the board or the exec team were sometimes setting a strategy for them without the people who could deliver it or the understanding or the plans about how you would do that. And it was almost being treated as a project rather than a wider business transformation.
It's, I mean, those are shocking statistics, Rebecca. And I read your AI Leadership Blueprint, and if people out there haven't, they should download it and read it. But I mean, that kind of turnover or potential turnover is a serious risk to any transformation. Why do you think the AI leaders are walking away so fast?
So, what they have told me is a mix of different reasons, but the overarching themes are there is a lack of real sponsorship or budget. I think one of the things a couple of people have said to me is that everybody thinks that they know AI, like CEOs, CFOs, COOs. And because it's been around for 2 years, the entirety of their career, which is obviously quite frustrating for someone who has been in AI for a considerable period of time to hear or really understands the mechanisms of it. Uh, it's still treated very much as an experiment rather than a strategy. A lot of people have just played around with different use cases, and therefore things have got a little bit bitty. I mean, that's a great way to test it, find something simple. There's a lot of poor integration into like the core business operations. So things happen in isolation rather than making any real impact. I also think they're told deliver this rather than given influence into that decision making, and like influence and being involved in strategy is something that's very important to a lot of these professionals. While they may be deeply technical in their background, that is not always the case. They're highly technical at minimum, but a lot of them would consider themselves to be quite seasoned business people, and they can find it quite challenging. They can't hire the people they need to deliver is another thing. There's a lot of pressure on budgets for hiring at the moment, especially in the UK with all the changes to national insurance, and globally with all the political and economic instability that we've seen. People have been reluctant to really back headcount changes. And I guess I think that some of the things that I am seeing is where there's been failed projects, because there's been loads of failures, and that's to be expected with something new. um, like they've kind of gone about their priorities the wrong way around compared to those who have successfully gained traction. So those who've successfully gained traction have looked at people and organizational design first, then the financial budget, then the project management, the change management, and the stakeholder management. Whereas the reality is a lot of people have approached this as I need to know my stakeholders, I'm going to come up with a change in the project, and money, we'll see what's available, and people have been an afterthought. So it makes it really hard for things to stick or truly transform. So on top of that, there's this growing gap between like emerging technologies like Gen AI and what boards understand or really are equipped to oversee. I mean, not everyone is immersed in this. So Matt, how do you see this reflected at board level?
So I see a lot of the themes you've just described, Rebecca, definitely amongst boards. But I think probably the one I see the most is that boards often lack that digital fluency to question AI assumptions or guide strategy. So people start talking about outputs rather than outcomes. And they say, build me one of these, build me one of those. But it lacks the strategy as to why we're building it. How do we know when we've made a success of it? So I think the outcome of that lack of AI fluency is that boards often struggle to set a strategy for the people doing the job. And as we see it, I've seen in many cases across the years, without a strategy, you tend to find individuals are not sure where they focus or should focus. And you just get people running as fast as they can in whatever direction they think is right. And actually, as a coherent sum of those efforts, you're all over the place. So I think you'll naturally see AI leaders, as you mentioned in your report, AI leaders will feel that their work at the moment is viewed as an oddity. It's a tick box, a board saying we're doing AI without really knowing what that means. It's an experiment and not something that feels like it's integrated into the core business operations as you've described. And I think ultimately the outcome of all this is a lack of perceived value. So boards feel they're doing AI projects, they're spending a lot of time and money, they're hearing lots of noise, and they don't really understand what value as an organization they're getting from that. And the other side of that, of course, is AI leaders don't feel they're getting the recognition. They feel they're delivering outstanding work, but somehow there's a disconnect between the outstanding work that they feel they're producing and the recognition that the board is giving them.
And You've said that boards don't really need to be technical, but they do need to be digitally fluent. What does that look like in a chair or a non-exec director? What should you be looking for?
I think you talked about often chairs or boards are made up of seasoned business professionals, but they maybe don't have that significant in-depth AI knowledge. So as a chair or a non-exec, I would be looking at my board and trying to decide, do I have, as with any role, do I have the right composition? In the same way I would do with finance, with sales, and broader tech, I'd be looking at, if AI is part of our strategy, do I have the people on the board who can challenge that, who can help me set the strategy? And if not, what am I going to do about it? I think on a board, I'd be looking to put together, for example, a subcommittee, a group of people who take away the AI piece and work on it, and have a lead director, as it doesn't just become something everyone's responsible for. As I like to say, if everyone's responsible, nobody's responsible. So I would have a person who I have identified that she or he is the person responsible for AI governance. And then I get AI on my dashboard. So in the way that I look at financial KPIs, I look at ESG KPIs and other things, I have AI on there as well, so that the board is looking at it and including risks in the risk section of the board pack, and actually focusing in and having those informed conversations to make sure that AI is a first-class passenger in this journey. And I think, as with everything, you're going to get different dynamics in the board, different strengths, different gaps. And I'd be looking to manage those with the outcome being we have constructive debate. So those fearless, informed conversations I talked about, we need those around AI on the board.
Absolutely. Boards obviously have to go beyond compliance and start anticipating this innovation and disruption that we're seeing. What are some of the smart questions and activities that board members should be doing to ensure that they are really contributing to these AI strategy conversations, even if they're not considering themselves technical?
Yeah. So boards want to lead, not just comply. They must, as I said, treat AI as a strategic issue, not as a siloed side project. That means smarter, future-facing questions like, the world's changing. How can AI reshape our market and disrupt our business model in the next 12 to 24 months? Is the board trying to look ahead and move from oversight to foresight in that area? What are we building now in the AI space? And how is that actually going to deliver on our long-term goals? Again, it's not just about saying I'm building an AI agent, an AI chatbot, whatever. What is this going to do for our business? How does it help us achieve our strategy, not just tactical moves? And I think as a board, one of the key things we're used to doing is looking at risk, assessing where our appetite is and where we are currently, and making sure those two are matched. So, what is our risk appetite for AI driven change? And how are we managing things like ethical concerns, things like bias, privacy, transparency, all these things that are part and parcel of successful AI? Who and what are we doing about it? So, if we built an experimentation culture in our organization to try to fail fast, to learn quickly, who's accountable if an AI system fails? How do we learn from those failures? So I think, to answer your question, Rebecca, directors should have enough fluency to challenge assumptions, as they do on many other matters, track progress, and engage meaningfully in AI conversations. So you don't need to have deep technical experience or expertise, but you do have to have curiosity and clarity and consistency. And I think practical activities, including putting AI as a standing agenda item, putting the metrics onto the board dashboards, as I've said, and using experts, external experts, to really help the board focus in. If you as a board don't know, find people who do. Get your board members trained by those external experts. Get them to facilitate conversations, up level the board to a point at which it is enough AI fluent that it can have those informed conversations. And that might require revisiting the board composition. You might have to bring in specific expertise around data, ethics, digital strategy. It's all vital. So do you have that? And I think finally, as I've said, the thing that allows organizations to win at AI and other things is that experimentation culture and culture of learning. So have transparency around successes, but also setbacks, and ensure that your CEO, she or he, is asked to lead and be bold and responsible for change. I think that
Definitely.
if you can do all those things, then that's where I would start. But I think it's not the whole answer. And I think I've seen boards with AI leaders who feel frustrated that boards aren't giving them what they need. So, out of your report, Becca, um, what support do you think AI leaders wish boards and executives gave them, but often don't?
So going back to one of the things that I mentioned earlier, definitely a lack of executive sponsorship is leading to this talent loss that businesses are starting to see. Um, I think they want to have visibility of the strategic conversations, not just be asked to report in and review. I think they do want to, engage and shape that and maybe meet with more senior people within their organizations than they currently are. Realistic timelines is something that comes up. I think ownership and making sure that there's backing from other functions if they are going to lead this transformation. Um, a lot, as I said earlier, there's tension across the C-suite, and sometimes it's like, well, marketing have actually just gone off and done their own thing, and that's absolutely to be expected in some organizations and some companies. But they maybe then have gone and spent a lot of money or bought tools that don't integrate or work across the business. And then also getting that investment into like people and systems and not just looking at this as a technology thing. This is way broader. There's no point in spending a lot of money on tools if nobody knows how to use them and nobody understands how their role is evolving rather than, changing or disappearing. I think there's a lot of communication challenges that companies have when they're making some of these bold changes, but the opportunities are there. Certainly, one of the leaders that I spoke with, they'd managed to get up to 1,700% improvements in productivity in parts of their business. Now, they were starting from a very low baseline, to be fair, and other areas they did not achieve that. But the commonality was like it was all about the people and thinking about this as redoing your target operating model and how you prioritized the the messaging. Like a lot of companies, I think, have made big mistakes by talking about going AI first. I mean, the reality is like we are people first. That's what your business is. You need to understand that. And I like to think about it as human enabled AI because that's where you're going to get the best results. But definitely, support with talent is important there. Retention's an issue. There's definitely pressure on salaries. I mean, there are lots of stories and there are real examples I know of where people have needed that one individual and been willing to pay, £1 million as a salary, for example. But boards need to be cognizant that you do need talent to execute this stuff or things will stall. And it's not always the talent that you have internally that can deliver it. I mean, in some organizations, the reality is doing this internally is like turkeys voting for Christmas. So there's a delicate balance there. But at the same time, I think they would like more support around the timelines, the lines of accountability, some clear KPIs, and a more open dialogue about how output, productivity, revenue, or costs are tracked, and how who has responsibility for each of those things. Because anyone can put in any new tool, but if no one uses it, you're never going to get any results. So making it more of a team effort. One of the big themes that I'm seeing is like people are asking me, how should boards and leadership teams rethink their makeup? It's not just their organizational structure, so that they're better positioned for this shift. How do you think we can do this? Like thinking about all of the board experience that you have.
So it your points you just made were fascinating, and I heard you talk about things like realistic timelines, multifunctional backing, and setting accountability and KPIs. It feels like that is a problem we've had for many years: unrealistic objectives, and then a lack of resources to deliver that. But to your question on their makeup, I think a lot of AI leaders I speak with, um, they often wish boards would move beyond that kind of hype and fear, the kind of whatever they heard on Radio 4 that morning. And they need the strategy. They want the strategy. Because going back to your previous set of answers, Rebecca, I think it's clear that if you set clear outcomes you're looking for, and then you start tracking the KPIs and measures against those, that actually allows AI leaders to succeed. It allows them to understand what good looks like. So I think a lot of AI leaders feel that they're missing that at the moment. The board is failing to provide that clarity. They like challenge. But they want. I talk, as I've said, about informed, fearless conversations. They're looking for informed challenge. Not just blind kind of. I read somewhere on some Reddit stream that this was a really big problem. Do we have? They're looking for, is our strategy right? What's the link between the strategy we've set and the things you're trying to do? So it's not just about budget and timelines, and they want someone to probe their assumptions, ethics, and is this going to provide the business impact that we're looking for? And if you don't get that, then too often boards just disengage because they don't. It's a cost sink AI to them, and they don't understand the value. It's a tick box. We're doing AI like everybody else, but AI leaders become disgruntled at that point and disillusioned. So I think boards can do that, provide good informed challenge, but they also need to provide a bit of top cover, air cover for people, because people are going to make mistakes. This is an experiment. This is about trying and seeing what works, and if it doesn't work, moving on. So AI leaders want to know that every time they make a mistake, they're not going to have the board jump down their throat. Clearly, I talk about a contained blast radius, and the idea that it's okay to make a mistake as long as you don't take the whole company down at the same time. So
Yeah.
I think, those things are really, really important, and the sort of things that AI leaders are looking for. But perhaps most importantly, they need that culture from the board, the reinforcement from the top. And this ties into the air cover, the top cover piece. So where boards and CEOs show curiosity and back long-term bets, not just what's going to make a difference in the next month or the next quarter. And they reward things like learning. It gives AI leaders the confidence and clarity they need to really drive innovation. So I think that, and to achieve that, it's about adding the right voices to the board and thinking about experience, not your traditional talent pool. Maybe this is a new type of person, somebody who's been a bit closer to the coalface more recently. They might be a different age, different background, they might have some cognitive diversity that brings new additional thinking to the board. As a board member, I'm looking to be challenged, and I'm looking to challenge others. So it's not just about optics, it's about making sure we have the right people to make an informed conversation, detect bias, challenge assumptions, and come up with better AI strategies.
Definitely. There's a lot there that we need to start thinking about a little bit more. I mean, I'm also hearing a little bit about cross-functional collaboration being a huge blocker for people. Um, some of the things that are driving that are, obviously the siloed teams, the fact that KPIs are not aligned, and a lot of things getting stuck in pilot mode. But I just want to jump back a little bit more to like what's happening when boards are excited about AI, but they're not seeing results. Like, what are the structural issues that are usually at play? Are there any things that you think are going on there in particular, Matt?
Yeah, I think Rebecca, I'd loop back to the point I made earlier. If everyone's accountable, no one's accountable. And I
Yeah.
think having that single point of accountability, I mean, ultimately, we're used to this model. Finance goes up to the CFO, and she or he is responsible for that. They're accountable. They may not be doing it day to day, but they're still accountable for making it work. And I think having a single point of accountability is key, because then the board can turn to that person and say, like, tell us how we're doing, create those KPIs, show us progress against it. I see problems where AI is not tied to strategy or OKRs. It's again a cost sink. We've got a team of 7, and it's kind of, well, yeah, I'm not actually interested in how many people or how many graphics cards I've had to buy this month. I'm interested in what are we achieving. And the things you tend to see if you've got this wrong is you tend to see AIs buried in an IT or analytics budget. And it's sort of a way off somewhere, literally deep in the dungeon of IT. And it's not promoted to a level that it's reporting, for example, direct to the CEO. As you said, Rebecca, you are going to reach a point at which people are needed, the right people. So making sure that budget and resources are aligned with our delivery expectations. Are we trying to do what a 20-person team should be doing with 3 people? Or vice versa? Have we invested in 30 people and actually it's still too early at the experimentation phase? So, the red flag for me is where I detect that AI is a silo, and I want to find out, what mandate do my AI and data teams have, and can they actually influence change? Because if they can't, we're not going to go anywhere. So, do we have the right delivery framework in place, right ethics framework? Do we have the right team in place? And I think most of all, are we getting insights in real time, week by week, board meeting by board meeting, not just end of year reports to say we spent this much and we had this many people, but is it actually driving decisions in the business? I think those are the key things for me. But if a board wants to assess readiness based on the reports that you've put together, Rebecca, what do you think they should be asking for?
I definitely think they could be doing an audit into the AI, their skills in general, but definitely looking at, who has the technical understanding, the network to leverage. I mean, boards bring more than just knowledge, and understanding what they can offer and if there's any gaps that they really do need to fill. Um, I think they should also be looking at like what projects are stuck and why. Um, get get the AI leader more involved in board or exec meetings if that's not already happening, and ask them, how should we be measuring progress in a way that's going to reflect real outcomes across the business? Get some healthy conversation amongst the leadership team about how that is going to work. And personally, I feel that some of the best results are coming when um, an external firm or expert is engaged to keep the board up to date, so that that they have that baseline of knowledge and that it's being maintained on AI developments, specific to their sector. And that way you're always going to know that there is that level of competency there, whilst still, a good diversity of perspective. And there is somebody that they can lean on to give them more depth of knowledge when they require. But yes, so in your opinion, what are the immediate moves that a chair could make this quarter to make sure the board is AI ready? Like what do you think that they could be doing?
Well, you just talked, Rebecca, about getting external experts in to help them understand more. And I think that's it: learning, learning, learning. And I think
Yeah.
if they were going to do anything, it'd be running a quarterly learning session for the board. What are the advances? What's happening in our sector? What's happening beyond our sector? So the board can put together that strategy. Um, and then the things I've talked about, getting a person who is responsible, she or he, as a lead director for AI, put the data into the dashboards, track them on the cadence of your board meetings. And I think if you've got the training, you've got the fearless, informed conversations, and you're watching the outcomes in terms of your KPIs, that's what you should be doing this quarter. And it's eminently achievable in a quarter.
Um, Definitely.
So, I mean, if I were to jump in and say, having done all that, if you were having done all this and we've got a board that's working well with AI, we've got a good lead director, how do you think people can hold on to their top AI leader? What would you say to them, Rebecca?
Give them influence, not just a job title, and give them the agency to act. Invest in their team, remove the blockers, publicly back their work, and elevate it internally. Really think about the comms and how that's going to impact the wider organization as you do it, because you don't want to save retention in one area, create problems in other areas of the business. And I think definitely funding their education so that they are staying relevant, up to date with conferences, communities. There's an internal R&D budget, because there is a reasonable amount of tinkering, or some tools, try it for a month, shelve it. It's inevitable there's going to be things that you don't get right first time here. And additionally, if you're really stuck about where to start at the board level, I think potentially, in the way that a lot of people have had digital boards, create yourself an AI board, for a year or two, committee that you can lean on. And like, in your opinion, though, what does an AI literate board look like in 2025?
So it's a cliche, but I've said it already, so I'll say it again: from oversight to foresight. So it's not just about governing today; it's about thinking about tomorrow. It should be diverse. You need inquisitive people. They need to be engaged, and they need to be asking better questions, not just signing off on tech spend. So you talked about educating, absolutely. Without a shadow of doubt, boards need to up level, as they continually do. This is not a one off, but it's almost part of that CPD. The world has changed. Do they understand it? And I think treating AI as a strategic imperative, I think, is absolutely the key for a successful board.
Totally. And what are the top things that boards, investors, and CEOs should be considering now, in your opinion?
Okay, so I was thinking about this question. I think there's four key things for me: shifting from oversight to foresight, as I've just said, and it's not just a risk control, but a driver for growth, and they need to harness it as they would any other driver for growth. I think they need to ask better questions. We've talked several times during this session about the need to challenge and be sufficiently informed to ask challenging questions. I think they need to make it a board level priority, as we've talked about, including KPIs and regular updates, just like finance or any other part of the strategy. And then you need to back it, as you've said, Rebecca, with culture. And that means getting the right talent in, the right people, but enable experiments and modeling a culture that values learning over certainty. AI is not a certain future, and we need to accept that and embrace it and get better at it. So those are
Yes.
my four things. But I mean, what's the one action you think, Rebecca, that someone ought to take out of this session?
Okay, so if there's only one action, obviously you can just download the AI leadership blueprint. I believe Rochelle has shared it in the comments if you're looking to get a copy of that. And if you've got more specific questions about what that means to your sector, you can drop me a message. But I think the key things beyond that are: make AI a standing item on your board agenda. This is not just a one-off deep dive, but it's a recurring topic. It's got to be tracked, challenged, and owned like any other strategic priority. And I think you also want to make sure that you've got the correct leadership team and board members in place, and that they are being augmented, potentially even temporarily. If you're lacking expertise in this subject, it's it's going to make things harder. And it's the reason that it's going to make things harder, or like the most common thing that I see, is people find it very hard to actually make a decision and move forwards. And that is not because anybody who's on a board struggles to make decisions. That's one of their core skills, probably. You'd hope so. It's because they don't have enough knowledge to effectively manage the risk behind what feels like a very big bet. And um, getting someone in who can just shape that conversation, cut through the noise, is going to save you loads of time and money definitely save you lots of money, because I think a lot of people don't realize how expensive things are when they go wrong. Like, you just spend a fortune in cloud services, or credits for your Gen AI provider, or maybe have a data leak. These are things that you just absolutely do not want to be worrying about in this day and age. And it's a sensible strategy when you think about what some of those things will cost you.
Yeah, I think you mentioned risk, Rebecca, and I think that's spot on. Risk drives value. As long as we do it in a sensible way within appropriate guardrails, and having those people, those individuals at whatever level, um, tell the board or help the board understand how to set that safe environment within which people can experiment. That's how we're going to drive value in an organization.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just looking at the comments just now, and there's some good points here. Someone's saying, do an AI SWOT analysis. And that's something anybody can immediately sit down and start on this afternoon. Um, and they're saying AI now has to be seen as a business unit within a corporation, and then it can feed into operations only where it can really be of value. And I think that is true. It might be something that evolves and shifts over time. I can see that worlds where this ends up sitting under finance or ops, or people, and being like rather than having a chief people officer, have a chief resources officer. But ultimately, just now, I think having that center of excellence is a really smart move, going back to managing risk and accountability.
Yeah,
Another
if I could just jump in, I agree. An AI SWOT analysis is about building strategy. So what is our AI strategy? What do we need to achieve? And I think, as with IT or tech or whatever you want to call it, I'm old enough to have seen that department bounce around all sorts of different areas in a business until it was saw as a value creator, and often now stands alone. And the same, I think, will happen to
Yeah,
AI as well.
absolutely. And again, other comments there around about keeping up to date and how challenging that is. So I have a podcast where I talk with AI leaders. Twice this year, I've had to re-record episodes because like DeepSeek happened, and what we talked about suddenly needed to be revamped. For example, it was with Gary Crawford. It was very good of him to to reboot and do that again. But it's like the pace of change is so fast that it is a challenge to keep up with what's really happening,
Yeah, I
regardless of
think
whether you're in tech.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And it's a really good question from Paul there. I think we talked about quarterly AI training for the board. You need that to keep up with this pace of change. You can't assume it's going to just happen, osmotically. People are going to absorb it. And you can't just do it once and then that's it for 5 years. This is a fast moving space.
Totally. And another person saying that at board level, there needs to be a chief AI officer. This is something that a lot of people don't think they need. And it's not always the most appropriate solution, or it might be an interim role. But I do think a lot of businesses can benefit from having somebody in that role, even if it turns out that it's like the chief electricity officer that existed when electricity was relatively new.
Interesting. I think for some organizations, a chief AI officer is absolutely the way forward. For others,
Yeah.
in the same way, you don't need C level for everything in the business. It's about understanding how important is AI to us, what's our risk, how does it appear in our strategy. If this is going to be 90% of our strategy, you probably need a chief AI officer. If it's about incrementing what's there, maybe not. Maybe it's a director who has unique responsibility.
Yeah. And again, I think making sure this person works closely with other C-suites is vital for the reasons there around communication, managing your external and internal brands. I mean, brand is incredibly important. We just have to look at Elon Musk and Tesla's share price this year. If you didn't believe it
Today,
before,
yes.
yeah, today. And Rochelle is asking, how should boards think about succession planning? Matt, what's your take on that?
So I think I actually don't think this would be treated any differently from any other sort of succession planning. I think boards good chairs understand her or his key players on the board and have a succession plan for them. And then the board members, their areas of responsibility, the C levels, should have succession planning across their organization. If someone is a key individual and their departure will affect the strategy of the business or our ability to achieve that strategy, then we need to have a succession plan behind that.
Um, I agree with what you're saying, and I think it's not necessarily just about succession planning. This is about the skills matrix that you have at the moment. Do you need it to be augmented? And does that change like the next time someone steps out, you take someone who's maybe worked in an AI company?
Agreed. I think that makes sense. It is the where am I strong? Where have I got gaps? Going back to that SWOT analysis, where are my weaknesses? What do I need to fill?
Absolutely. I don't see any other questions or comments just now, so we can wrap this up. But do you have any closing thoughts, Matt?
I just think it's a hugely dynamic space. I think it's moving very quickly, and we're all learning. And I think we need to be used to the idea that there is not a solution we're going to build today that's going to work for the next 10 years. This is something that will evolve, and we need to be curious and be willing to evolve as a board.
Totally. I also think that we need to look past the fear mongering. I mean, yesterday, PwC produced a report that was released, and definitely worth looking at. We'll put a link in here as well, showing how this is actually creating more jobs. And the jobs are rapidly evolving. And I think a lot of the fear stems, is in the wrong place just now. So most of the people who are watching this or have watched this are likely to be professionals, educated, like we are used to learning. And, if we had to go off and do an exam and write an essay, we would do it. It wouldn't be a huge deal. Probably, I certainly wouldn't find it lots of fun to start with. But the people who are going to be displaced that we need to start thinking about more carefully in our organizations are, we're not far away from having autonomous vehicles, and there's stuff about how they could be safer. I actually think, like somebody told me recently, there's like 20 million truckers in the United States. How do we start thinking about upskilling and re-educating them? Because that is where there's going to be like the biggest disruption in society. And yeah, we definitely need to look beyond those moments, but be cognizant that there will be big changes. I do think 2040 we'll look back and think, oh, what was that like? Why were people worried about it? In the way
Yeah,
that people wondered.
I think we've seen various sort of inflection points. So the internet, everyone assumed that when the internet came along, shops wouldn't exist at all. It's about those people who are willing to embrace and adapt. And if you're
Yeah,
willing to, take hold of it and say, actually, I can see how I can increase my value through the use of these tools, I think it'll be okay.
no problem. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Matt. And
Thank you.
hopefully we'll do this again one day.
I look forward to it. Thanks, Rebecca.